Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Rowan Nadler, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, and I now have been doing this for 20 years. And between the two of us, we've helped thousands of leaders to perform in the top 10%. So we're always trying to get some tips, some tools from top performers to authors to gurus, anybody that can tell us how they became a top performer, or what do you need to do for your team? What can you do? What can you do a little differently, or what can you do a little bit more? One of the things we like to start off always with a little bit of a research. Center for Creative Leadership, which is one of the best non-academic leadership institutions, talks about one negative person on your team can break down the psychological safety. So think about your team, one negative person, and it's equal to 3 positive people. So if you have someone on your team who is negative and who is bringing down your team, being able to have those crucial conversations, those kind of things that are going to be very helpful to improve your whole team. And today we're going to talk with Ryan Cherry, and he has a new book that we're going to talk about. He's an ex-Marine, and we're really excited to talk to him. Kat, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Relly. I was just thinking about the statistic that you were sharing. And we know that many, many years ago, the ratio that Barbara Fredrickson actually
Right.
published from University of North Carolina stated that it's a 3-to-1 ratio. For every negative a human being takes on, it requires 3 positives to recover. So it sounds like somebody at the Center for Creative Leadership has started to apply that same formula to psychological safety, which doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But we also have to take it in context. And I'm going to put it in context with regard to our guest today, Ryan Cherry, retired United States Marine Corps. And there's a very big distinction between somebody who is a former Marine and a retired Marine. So I just want to state that up front. And as you know, I worked with the U.S. 4-star in charge of manpower for the U.S. Marine Corps, and I trained a handful of people down at the School of Infantry on emotional intelligence, and we did a huge project with them, helping them define how to pick assaulters and snipers based on those emotional intelligence categories. So my heart my
Yeah.
heart is with the Marine Corps on a day-to-day basis. Not to mention that I was jumping with the Marines when I messed up my back. So here I am, X number of years later, 50 skydives plus later, and I'm going through, as you know, my second back surgery last week?
All
Uh,
right.
because smarty pants here realize that nobody's going to trust you as a behavioral scientist helping these guys, especially MARSOC and the SEAL teams and DevGru, same community, just a different moniker, and of course CAG, which is our Delta Force. And so they're not going to work with you if they don't trust you. So if you don't do what they do, it's going to be hard for you to get on the inside of those communities and have a seat at the table to help them. So all of my injuries I chalk up to my love for these communities. So as we think about the story today, let me just add this. Psychological safety comes in many different forms. And in the corporate environment, unfortunately, it comes from this conscious need for making everybody feel comfortable. And I just want to warn the audience about that, because if you have no discomfort in your life, which is what our military professionals and our first responders have to go through in order to tolerate the growth that's necessary for them to be able to do their job, you're not going to get anywhere. So if you love to say, Relly, if you stay on autopilot, you're going to stay mediocre. Well, hello, audience of coaches and executives. If you don't experience pain, discomfort, that leads to growth on the other side, you ain't going anywhere. And you're going to always be mediocre. So if psychological safety is more important to you than your own development, your own growth, and your own experiences, you got to get out of your own way. And I
Yes.
hope that Ryan is going to talk to us about that today. So let me bring him on without further ado. So, Ryan Cherry, Colonel, retired U.S. Marine Corps, is an executive coach, a speaker, and a retired Marine aviator. He's also a senior military leader with over 25 years of service around the globe. From leading helicopter squadrons in the Indo-Pacific to advising top DoD, Department of Defense leaders on crisis response and autonomous aviation strategy, he's dedicated his career to leading under pressure. Cherry is widely recognized for building and mentoring high-performing teams, driving innovation, and leading complex operations, probably, and organizations in some of the most demanding environments. And for more information, you can visit him at Ryan, RYANA, Cherry, CHERRY.com. That's Ryan.Cherry at, is it Ymail? YMAIL.com. There we go. You can email Ryan.Cherry at ymail.com. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and what a great introduction. And I really enjoy the start of this conversation and talking about all these issues and how they translate from the military life to civilian and the workforce on the civilian side. So I'm really happy to be here and excited to have a conversation with you both.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here for a second because I was just invited to be a speaker at the American GI Forum out in Las Vegas. And I've been asked to join the education and employment panel. And I think it's interesting that we're talking about this transition from military into civilian world because it is daunting, and it can be a very powerful experience for those of you in the military who are learning how to take what you have done under pressure into an environment that seems in many ways pedantic and non-productive. And then those of you who are in the industry welcoming these amazing veterans, you need to step up your game because they're not going to pander to the culture that you've created around safety. They are, let me put it this way, step to it, let's get it done achievers. And if people are going to get in the way, it's going to be something that's going to create some trauma for people, because if you're standing in the way of success, it doesn't matter how many team members you have and how many strengths they have. Somebody with a military background, especially like yours, Ryan, is going to see things a little bit different. And I'm really glad that you're here to share that with us.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, we want to kind of pick your brain, especially around the pressure. And Kathy talked about, if you stay in autopilot, you stay average. For most of the people in the corporate world that we deal with, they're not, it's a different kind of pressure. It's not at life and death that you're dealing with. So we're really interested in picking your brain on some of that. So we'd like to start off with who's been some of the key influences that's kind of helped you be where you are today.
I've had the opportunity to work with, to serve under, and to lead some really amazing individuals in my Marine Corps career. And some of those leaders that I look up to didn't just wear the Eagle Globe and Anchor for the Marine Corps, they were across many of the services. So I've had a really blessed life and a really great career filled with a lot of ups and downs, but overall just an amazing 25 years. But I'm going to come back to the core of who I am as far as answering this question, and nothing against the leaders that served. But my mom and dad were two key people who were the two drivers to develop the character and the person I was. And my dad was a Marine. He was a Chief Warrant Officer 4 when he retired. He enlisted during the Vietnam War. And he was a mechanic and a crew chief in helicopters. And he developed the person who I wanted to become. As a kid, all I wanted to do was be like my dad. I wanted to be a Marine at a very young age.
Yeah.
He implored me to wait, to not enlist and to go to college, because one of the reasons he joined the Marine Corps was he had no support and couldn't afford to pay for himself. So he was going to use the GI Bill. And he'd seen Marine Corps from the enlisted and the officer side as a chief warrant officer and all the way up to gunny on the enlisted side. And he did really well. He was a vice president for Johnson & Johnson on the outside world. He did really well in his civilian life. and he could pay for his boys to go to college. So he told me if I want to be a Marine, I'd be a Marine officer. And I believed he was right, and I followed that path. So he developed many of my character traits that I have, and a lot of it was the sharp edges that you need, and was kind of hinted at earlier, to live the life that we do in the Marine Corps. And I kind of think of it as my father. If you take a sword, the sword has its sharp edge, and I think of my mother as the scabbard or the sheath that you put the sword away in, to kind of blunt and round your edges, to allow me to have the sharpness, and sometimes anger needed and sometimes not needed in my career. But also, my mom was able to round me out in a way, for her love and kindness for the world, to take my sharp edges and round them out to be softer when I needed to be. But don't get me wrong, a Marine's wife is not someone who is just kind and loving. She was very, very demanding of us as children. She was sometimes, more often than not, the disciplinarian, because my dad was away as much as he was. So I really have been shaped by my mom and my dad. The
Yeah.
love, the kindness, the care for others from both of them. And then and I talk about my dad gave me my sharp edges, and my mom gave me my round ones, which allowed me to handle multiple situations different ways. And you don't always have to run through the wall. Sometimes you can realize there's a door, you can walk through it well. So I got both of those from my mom and my dad.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Well, you spent 25 years, dedicated, I would say 25 years, leading Marines in high pressure environments. What leadership lessons translate most directly from the military to everyday life and business?
I think there are so many that can translate all the leadership traits that we learn in the Marine Corps, but there's two I'll focus on, and they go hand in hand. I think loyalty is paramount. Um, Loyalty could go many different directions, but I think as a leader, and with those that are following you or working for you, if you're not loyal to your team and keeping their best interests in mind, you really start to lose out on the benefits of having a team of experts around you, who are going to not only look out for the desired end state of whatever the mission is of the company, or taking care of family members. But if you don't show loyalty to them, you lose the opportunity to return, to have true loyalty back towards you and whatever your mission might be. And secondarily, and in keeping with the first, one thing that is truly innate in the Marine Corps is to know and take care of your people, to understand who they are and what drives them. And if you can do those two things together, you are able to build a team that can succeed in any situation.
So what's so good about what you're saying, one, the loyalty, but then really knowing your people, and you're a coach, Kat and I are coaches, and why I like to talk about that, we don't, we're on autopilot, is many leaders don't take the time now that because they're on autopilot, we don't have the time. And so part of that is they're not really looking at their people in depth unless someone like you, Ryan, me, or Kat are in front of them, and we have these conversations to go deeper about their people, and what are their strengths, and what's the strategy you're using to develop them. And so that is really important. Maybe say a word about just in developing people, like what are some of the key learnings, that you had in developing your team, and really understanding, where to go, what are their strengths? How do you do that?
Absolutely. I think it's important to sit down and have a conversation with those that are working for you, and in certain levels of organizations, you can't do that with everybody who falls under your sphere of influence. But there's a level, to maybe three levels of people below you, that you want to sit down with and do two major things. You want to tell them what you think, what drives you, and what you're looking for in the organization and looking for in the individuals who work for you, and what's most important to you. And then you ask them about themselves, what drives them and where they fall out in what you see as important. And in doing that, you're aligning the ability for them to know what drives you as a boss and what you might be looking for, and allow them to get ahead of you in when the challenges start to roll out, you may not have access to your team all the time. If they know what you want, they know your commander's intent or what the end state is that you want to get to, they can make decisions that benefit the organization. And secondly, you want to give them the opportunity to lead in their own way. Just because I do something a certain way doesn't mean that that's the only way it can be done. And allowing your team to accomplish whatever task it is in the way they think is best, as long as you get to where you want to be in an organization, you allow them to grow and succeed, or they might make a mistake and realize that maybe that way wasn't best. And then you can learn from it and move on. But really, getting to know the team, laying out what is most important to you, and then allowing your team to take on tasks in their own way. It doesn't have to be your way or the highway.
It's interesting when you say your way or the highway. You know, it's a little bit different in the military versus the civilian world, right? When you're in the military, it kind of is my way or the highway. And in the civilian world, when that type of a strategy is used, it really creates tension. Tell us a little bit about why you believe that the best leaders are really willing to learn from failures rather than avoid it. And let me just preface your answer with there's a theory at the college where I work. It's the National Command and Staff College. And we have a couple of books that we've written on it. And the theory is called the elasticity of identity. And it's about getting left of bang and moving beyond that trauma, right? And we've now applied that to everyday life. And that every leader has to have elasticity of identity in order to kind of move forward in their lives and be successful. So tell us what you believe the best leaders are willing to learn from their failures.
As an aviator across all services and really across the Marine Corps and on other than the aviation realm, but it's very much an aspect of aviation to never skip the debrief. No matter the flight level of intensity, it could be a ferry flight from one location to another, very administrative, or it could be a complex mission using all different aspects of the military enterprise to accomplish. We never skip the debrief. We always highlight the goods, the bads, and the others. And we're always looking for the things we did poorly so we don't repeat the mistake and everybody gets better. And if you take that type of mindset for the aviation aspect, then there's often times where there's failures. And in some situations, like failure is not an option. You're going to accomplish a mission no matter what. However, those instances are rare. And a leader should always be willing to look for the things you can do better. And really, at every level, whoever is in charge should own the mistake that they made, identify what happened and correct it. And if you can do those three steps, you can achieve anything you set out to do, because every time you have a failure, if you can do those three things, you can correct it and you can move on and you can be better the next time.
Well, as the professional interrupter here, I'm going to take the opportunity to
Yeah.
give us a quick hot wash. We're going to go to a break. Don't go away. We're having an amazing conversation with Ryan Terry. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. We're talking with Ryan Cherry. He has a new book called Readback. We're going to ask him about that just came out in May that really talks about leading under pressure. So he's been under pressure, and this Cat and I've talked about. For most of our listeners, they have not experienced the same pressure that you have and the people in our military have. But there's a lot of key learnings that we can get from that. So tell us about Reback and then how to make better decisions when maybe it's presenting to the board or maybe there's some kind of crisis. Yeah, so take it from there.
Readback is a number of stories from my career where I wish I'd known the answer to the test before I took it. For many years, while in service, I was taking notes in the notes page of my iPhone of stories that were impactful to me and lessons where I learned something significant. Many of them failures, as we were talking to earlier, some of them great successes, and others just nice things to remember. So as I got closer to retirement, it really started getting to me that this was something I think other people could learn from. So each chapter in Readback is a story that teaches a lesson that is impactful to service members, but really is applicable for anybody. And at the last paragraph or two of each chapter is a civilianized version of the lesson. So Readback is very much stories are very military in theme, but I take all the military speak out of the lesson in the last couple of paragraphs in each chapter. So anybody who's reading it can walk away with an understanding of the military lesson in the civilian world.
So just say a little word more about it. So what does that sound like when you're doing a readback? Just so so like if someone's going to say, okay, I'm doing a readback now, what are they doing?
So Readback for me it's three different levels here. So the core of myself as a Marine Cobra pilot, my wartime and much of my training was in close air support and close proximity to friendlies. So that means that we are delivering fires on the enemy, but there's a friendly force on the ground that is near the enemy, which requires in detailed coordination in real time. So we have forward air controllers or joint tactical air controllers that are on the ground with the friendly forces that are telling you all the information you need to attack the enemy effectively and safely. And in order to release ordnance from your aircraft, you must give a mandatory readback to the Marines or service members on the ground. They know that you know where everybody is and where the enemy is. So that's part of Readback. As a staff officer getting out of the cockpit, oftentimes I'd be sitting with my senior leaders, and sometimes the conversation would meander and not based on what you were saying or what they were saying, but there might be multiple people in the room that are trying to get this intent and the desired end state from the senior leaders. So sometimes conversations meander, and you could be sitting in a situation where you're not quite sure that you understand what you need to do walking out the door. And so a technique many people use, I certainly did it, especially in my time when I was in European Command, was I would ask my boss if I could read back what I think they told me to do. And it gives them the opportunity to say yes, no, or change whatever it is that they want you to do. And that's really important, I think, because at many times in many different career paths, you may not get access to your leaders all the time. And if you walk out of the room and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, you could lose time, you lose money, and in the military, you could lose lives because you didn't understand what your task was. So that's the readback I would ask for from my senior leaders.
As we all think about being coaches or using empathic listening, we naturally use a type of readback where we're actually asking someone, did I hear you correctly? Is this what I heard you say? Is my understanding correct? Right? So those are the kinds of questions that we would use in a readback. And I love that you've taken that very simple process, in addition to elements of after action review and hot washes, as a way for people to really check in with their teams to make sure that they are listening, that they're hearing correctly, because 9 times out of 10, people are not having one-on-one conversations anymore, and they're certainly not face-to-face. And we rely so heavily on Slack or text or some other kind of group communication, right? Google. We rely on Zoom. We rely on these non-personal, indirect means of communication. And it's very easy for things to be misconstrued and misunderstood. Tell us a little bit about when we speak to and you write about understanding the strengths of every team member. Why is that so crucial to building high performing teams, in addition to a little bit of reflecting on what I was just saying?
So as I started earlier talking about like allowing your team to understand who you are and what makes you tick as a leader, and the reverse is true. Understanding your team is extremely important, because as you have a team of experts, hopefully, or trying to make them become experts, your success really relies on that. Very few people are successful as individuals, and are the only reason why any organization will do well. The people around you, above, adjacent, and below you are extremely important to success. But as the leader in any circumstance and any size of an organization, understanding the talents of your team are really important, and that goes to many different levels. If you're moving quickly and need to accomplish a job immediately, you want to put the most talented person in whichever lane needs to be accomplished in the lead for that position, and you have others take care of other aspects of what needs to be done. In less pressurized situation, you want to pressurize the person and put them in a situation where they're going to be tasked with something they're not comfortable with. They may not be very good at, and you allow them to get better. You debrief what happened and you make them a more well-rounded individual. So in the next instance, you may find out that they were not very good at a certain task, but by challenging them and charging them to do things that are outside their box, they now become the person that is on the dot the next time. Or you're going to grow your team. Individuals are cross-trained across different talent spaces, or you know that at some point in time, one of your best is going to be promoted or move on, and you want to ensure that you have people in your organization that can do any task at any time. And that's really where the Marine Corps specifically, and from my lens and across the services, in an HMLA squadron or Cobra and Huey squadron, you find yourself always learning on the job, because you're never allowed to spend enough time in one job within a squadron long enough, because they're moving you around to become talented in every aspect of the squadron, not only to become a better leader when you get promoted or a commander, but also because in war, people die and everybody has to be able to carry the weight and the task of the squadron as you move forward. You can't lose one person and fail. Everybody has to pick up whatever it is that is the task associated with the job. So there's many layers to this, but really know your people and challenge them when you have time, or pick the winners when you don't.
So that's very clear. You know, one of the things that we do, or we like to talk about, I think, being clear about what's going on for the individual. We have this tool that we talk about, the top 5, and it's kind of your readback. So the leader independently says, what are the top 5 responsibilities for the individual? And then the individual says, here's what I think my top 5 are. And it's basically very clarity focused on, am I doing the right things? And often some of the research is saying, of those 5, only 1.5 are the same. So the value of your book and the value of Readback and the value of really making this a specific conversation that is getting the clarity. One of the things that we like as a metric in the coaching schools, did you get a that's right? And if you haven't got a that's right, you haven't offered up something to get a that's right. And so even though it's deliberate, but as you're emphasizing, you know, with your Readback, it's so important. And so as we're talking about the individual and that's listening, the other side of this that you have in your book is talking about your competitor's point of view. And I think maybe that's in the business world, is understanding, you know, who you're dealing with. And that's a competitive advantage. So maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So the term I use in the book is something I got from one of my senior leaders in my last job before I retired. And he would use the term "walk around the fighting hole," in a very tactical sense, as an infantry, Marine, or service member, in any service. We have fighting holes where 2 Marines are together. You dig a hole to provide cover and concealment for you against the enemy, and you look from your position at the enemy, and you think you have everything right. But when you walk around the fighting hole, you go a 360 view of your position to see your perspective, see your position from the enemy's perspective. And it
Oh,
allows you to strengthen all of your weaknesses in your defense and your ability to go on the offense if you want to flip the switch. However, that term very specifically to the military can be used in all walks of life. And you can use it for competitive advantage by looking at where you stand, looking at where your competition stands, and maneuver your organization to take advantage of where they have weaknesses or maneuver to take advantage of their strengths and replicate them. But I also want to talk about this in a different light. You can use Walk Around the Fighting Hole to better understand a competitor, a person, an organization, a political party. You have your beliefs and your way of life. If you can understand how other people think and the reasons why they think, you can change your mind or you can reinforce your opinion. But without looking at all aspects of life
yeah.
by walking around the fighting hole, you lose the opportunity to learn about yourself and about others in a way that may give them grace or it gives you a competitive advantage.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I think it's so important for us to get out of our own headspace because the more we stay embedded in our own thinking, the longer we're going to be out of touch with reality and possibly make decisions that are, well, they're risky, right? Because we could lose any competitive advantage we have by staying in that mindset. Talk a little bit about how you encourage leaders to tell people what needs to be accomplished without telling them exactly how to do it. Why is that approach so effective?
That approach, the core of it for me comes from the Marine Corps' maneuver warfare and really centralized command, decentralized execution. In the Marine Corps, we spend a lot of time planning for whatever it is we're going to do, whether it be an exercise or an operation in war. And you go through all the details and all the planning, and you bring in all the senior leaders and the planners as well, and you come up with a plan before you step out. But the Marine Corps is very well aware that once you step out, the plan completely changes when the enemy gets a vote. So although the centralized command is telling you what to do, decentralized execution allows the thinkers and the workers at the lower level to have really two key pieces of information from the commanders. The commander's intent, like what is it I want you to do, and the desired end state. What is the end state that we want to achieve once we've accomplished whatever the mission is? And by having those two pieces of information, you allow your subordinates to accomplish the mission without always checking in. When something changes in the battle space, you don't have to go back and ask the boss how to do the next step because you're being given the opportunity to accomplish the mission with the commander's intent and knowing what the desired end state is. At a more specific level with individuals, allowing someone to carry out your plan in their own way allows them to mature and become a better person and learn as they go through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it also takes advantage of the fact that you have people who are probably better at that task than you are. Once you're in a leadership or management position, you've come from where you were an expert and now you're a manager or a leader over experts in many fields. And the higher you go, the harder it becomes to be the expert in any one lane. So by allowing them to accomplish a mission the way they think is best, you're using their talents to achieve your end state every day. Then now there are pitfalls there, and you need to make sure that they are going to get to where you want them to be. But by allowing them to use their talent and expertise to achieve the mission or the desired end state, it emboldens the leadership below you to then replicate that down the chain as well and allow individuals to lead using their talents as opposed to just how you say it needs to be done.
Yeah, that's beautiful. To kind of say that in other words, we have this tool called the leadership two-step. In the first step, you step in just like you're saying and set the vision, where are we going, what are the resources? But then you got to step out for a while, kind of like you're saying. And I think for many leaders, they don't step out. So we have this little assessment, are you stepping in, sharing the vision? Are you stepping out for a while? But then just like you said, you got to step back in, acknowledge when it's right, but then also step back in when it's not right and quickly turn it around. So right the ship and then step out. So that idea of step in, step out, And I think a lot of times, even that language, leaders are saying, I never step out. I mean, they're in all the time, and that's burnout, and that's not empowering their people. So
Absolutely.
that's so what are some of the tools that you use or have used to step out? You know, because it's that lingering, I should still be in. I'm not sure about this.
So I lean heavily on my experience with the Marine Corps. I had some bosses who were very heavy-handed and had to ensure that everything was done a specific way and really cramped the ability of the organization to
Yeah.
maneuver to get to where they want to be. Not only give them what, but give them more, right? And so I would often speak truth to power in those situations as a subordinate to try to get to where we needed to be with their intent, but in a better way. And sometimes I won, sometimes I lost, but I had good bosses that didn't crush me for trying. Um, but I think it's a nuanced challenge to try to find a way to allow people enough room
Yep.
to succeed and not and make errors that can be fixed and be can
Yeah.
learn from, but never go so far that there's going to be a failure. A
Right.
good example, just for 1 minute, is when you're flying and you're teaching someone how to fly. This is very specific aviation, but it matters for this conversation. As an instructor, you need to let the student go as far as they possibly can to almost crash without damaging the aircraft, to allow them to make all the corrections they need to and learn all the way, but you can never let the airplane hit the ground or something catastrophic happen. That's very detailed and specific in the tactical world of flying. But the same thing can be used when you're talking
Yeah.
about managing people. You
Wow.
know what the lane is. There's something outside of the lane that you can let them get to, but once they get in that gray area, you got to bring it back in
Yeah.
because you could fail at your mission, or you lose out to your competitor.
Well, you can also create enough damage in that logistics chain. You could, and I'm talking about the industry within the regular civilian world. I'm calling it that logistics chain. In the real world, you're going to damage $1 million asset, not to mention the people that are responsible for it. And I don't know if the world knows, but very few people actually graduate from flying helicopters. Much different than flying a plane with fixed wing. And helicopter pilots are a unique breed. I think when your teacher walks out of that pit and leaves you there for the first time to do it yourself, it's a very scary moment, and you really need that resilience and that confidence to know your strengths and to use them appropriately, because that's a huge, huge
Yeah.
asset that you're dealing with. So, as you think about these things, we're going to go to a break. And when we come back, Ryan, let's talk about both your success and your mistakes throughout the book that you identify. And why was it important to include those difficult moments? Don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. We're talking with Ryan Cherry, and his website is Ryan A. Cherry, Cherry, just as it sounds.com. He has his new book that came out just in May, Readback, sharing some of his successes. And in your book, you share successes, but also mistakes that you have made. And so, why do you think that's important to include these really difficult moments?
So there's a number of reasons why I included them. Most important, because they happen. I have made more than my fair share of mistakes. And to be honest, I learned more from my mistakes than I ever did from any of my successes.
Hmm.
And I was successful in the Marine Corps. I did all the things I wanted to do. I became a colonel. I'm not saying I didn't do well, but the mistakes are the ones that really jump out at me. And in many situations, I wanted to ensure that the mistakes I made, I never repeated. But more importantly, that if I could help somebody else not make the mistakes I made, that is the biggest win for me and people reading Readback. And I talked about it before, but I think the keys for me, and I was, there's two types of people, I think, maybe there's more, but two core types of people when we're talking about owning your mistakes. I think the majority of people will own up to their mistakes, but there's some out there who will do it's not me. They'll point in a couple different directions just to get the heat off themselves. And I've always found that for me, as the one making the mistake, or for people who work for me who make a mistake, if you can own the mistake, if you can identify what went wrong and you can correct it, you take all the sting and anxiety out of whoever it is you're working for when something went wrong, because they don't have to point it out to you.
Mm-hmm.
You walk in and say, I did this. It was a mistake. This is why it happened. And this is the step I'm taking to make it better. You relieve so much stress and anxiety from the leadership for them to understand that they don't need to jump right
Yeah.
in and fix it right away.
Right. Right.
Now,
Well,
there,
it's fascinating. When we interview people, one of the big interview questions usually is, tell us about a time when something didn't go right and how did you correct? And that's us, right, as the hiring organization looking for the opportunity for this person to really admit that something is going on and they've been able to cure it. But yet we lose that somehow once we've hired them, right?
absolutely. So I think there there's a level two of owning mistakes. You don't need to come in and say to your boss, I made 1,000 little pinprick mistakes all along the way. Like those little things, fix them, move
Right.
on. I'm talking about the core to
Yeah.
whatever it is the problem, right? And I think it's really important
Yeah.
to be able to do that. And for me, I know in the big mistakes I made, because I came forward and I owned it, I was able to fix it and
Yeah.
move on without being scathed. And those that worked for me, if they did this for me, and they took ownership of what the problem was, I was able to build them back up without ever having to break anybody down, which is a huge step forward without even taking a step.
So one of the things that's really important that you said, Ryan, the result of owning your mistakes is building trust. And one of the biggest things that destroy trust is if someone's unpredictable. And I like what you said about what is your boss thinking about. And it really is around their brain and where's it going. If they're worrying and they're apprehensive, is this going to work? Should I check back in with you? That's a lot of brain energy that's unnecessary. And it leads them to think this person is not predictable. But when you share the mistake, you share why it happened, and you share what you're going to do differently, your leader can go, okay, let me take that one off my plate. This person's got it handled. But I don't think a lot of people do that. And therefore, there's that trust, and it's around that unpredictability. And so the boss is more in versus stepping out and let people move forward. So that's really very important. So maybe say a little bit more about just how do you go about that? I guess I'm talking about more internally, like when something doesn't work and you're going, should I really say this? I'm going to look bad. Like, do you go back to your values? Like, what do you go back to? Maybe it goes back to kind of what you learned from your dad.
Yeah, so that's a really hard question. I've never really thought about it in a way of like what drives me. In the beginning of my book, I'm very raw about kind of all of my insecurities as a kid growing up and the challenges I faced and kind of how that made me who I am. But I think there's an aspect of two things. We already talked about one of them very much so is loyalty. And I think your loyalty to the organization allows you to be selfless in your critique of yourself. And then I very much, and sometimes to my detriment, I will always speak truth to power when the time is right. And really, it's not to be the squeaky wheel and be the person who's always saying, it should be done a different way. But I would always push my leadership. If we were going to do something that was, I'm not even going to go illegal or immoral, but if something we were doing was going to not achieve the desired ends that we wanted, or more importantly, was going to put us in a situation where something unsafe would happen, especially flying helicopters, I would always speak up and speak truth to power. Now, with that being said, I would make sure my voice was heard if I couldn't live with myself if something bad happened because I didn't speak up. But once I spoke up, and being a good follower is a key to being a good
Mm.
leader, is if my bosses told me to shut up and color or just execute what they told me to do, I would turn on my heel and I would carry out their intent, their way, as best I possibly could with no ill intent or malice in my mind. Once I spoke truth to power
Yeah.
and they heard me, and I had very good bosses who would listen, and 50-50. Sometimes they'd listen to me, sometimes they wouldn't. But I would never walk out of the room not doing what it was
Yeah.
they told me to do, as long as it was legal and moral and ethical, which it never was not that. It was always in the realm of what we should be doing. But those are two key pieces I would say that
That's great.
drive me to be the one
Yeah.
who will always own my mistakes.
So one thing just on that, Kat, is it sounds like your values and being loyal to yourself. And what are your values? And the reason I'm saying that, I think for many people, having that conversation, like what are your values and can you stick with that? And so I think those are those decision points that where you speak truth to power because something's going on internally about what's right and loyal to what you're thinking about or your intuition. Go ahead, Kat.
No, I'm just listening to this, and to me, there's a real corollary here between recognizing when you need to own up to something and
Hmm.
recognize that it's either an opportunity for growth or, like many helicopter pilots, I think it's like 70 to 80% fall out. Maybe it's that
Yeah.
person's recognition that I'm in over my head. I need more training. I need more resources. I need help of some kind. But they're just not able to
Yeah.
identify what that is. And it's really important for a leader to know when somebody has the skills and the talents, but they don't have the confidence or the resources. And I think that's at the root, Ryan, of some of the things that you're speaking to here and being able to own what's not working and being able to speak to it with truth and then identify those things and then ask for the help. That's part of the readback, right?
Yeah.
I am seeing, I am feeling, I am hearing, and this is telling me as the leader, yeah, that you need something more than you have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's correct, and it's definitely going back to the earlier point from Relly is the loyalty to yourself to make sure that you do what you think is right.
Right.
And one of the things I would say often when I was in command, and I put in my book, but it's do the right thing at the right time for the right reason.
Mm, that's great. And you have to really know your own strengths, to do that.
And then you get a that's right.
That's right. So
Yep.
that's one of our coaching metrics, in the coaching school. I say, are you listening more than talking? Are you getting that's right? And are you focusing more on the person, how they're dealing with things than the problem? We all get addicted to the problem. Oh, hey, why don't you try this? Or here's what worked for me. Do you see some of that in your coaching? And who are the people that you're coaching the most? Because I would think from a military background, we all do this, but you know what's right, and you want to go to what's right, and it may not be letting that person explore what they think is right.
Yeah, I think the key is same thing you guys are talking about, where it's you want to lead them where they want to be without showing them how to get there, and that's been a challenge for me a lot in my career. Now, as a Marine, there's some times where if we're meandering and don't know where to go, that's when you step in and say, we're going to do it this way, right?
Right.
And that's when people are really struggling. But in the coaching world, I think just guiding them in the place that they want to get to, and letting them find their way there. And sometimes, I'll call it planting a seed. You throw an idea out there that isn't the answer, and then you let them get to that on their own. And when someone owns that idea, even though
Yeah.
you might have planted the seed days or weeks ago, now it's truly theirs, and
Right.
they take it moving forward. And it wasn't something that was handed to them in a coaching conversation.
Well, it looks like we're coming to the end of the show. Anything in particular you want to add for our listeners' pleasure before we start to close down here, Ryan?
So I really appreciate the time. This is a great discussion. I think the work you guys are doing is really good. I'd love it if anybody's interested in hearing more about what I think. I mean, Readback is my stories, my lessons, and really my life in the Marine Corps. So you can find Readback in many places. It's on Amazon. It's at Amplify Publishing Group. And if you, like you already talked about, if you want to find out a little bit more about me, ryanhrary.com is the best place to go. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. But this has been really great, and I love these discussions. So I love talking about ways to help people through my own successes and failures.
All right, so let's kind of bring it to a close with some of our lightning round. And so just we'll give you a sentence in completion and you complete it. So leadership is,
Wow, that's a good one. So I would say leadership is not about the person. Leadership is about the team.
okay, great. And taking this into the work world, at work, it's all about,
It's an accomplishment.
okay. And then this one is always interesting. During the day, like if we go back to we're on autopilot, no one really has the time. What are the things that you do during the day to kind of recharge yourself?
So I think the best way to recharge during work is to get out and talk to your people, have conversations and get to know them better.
Well, thank you, Ryan. We've really enjoyed having you on the show. Best of luck with your new book, Readback. And thanks, everybody. 20 great years here with you, over 800 episodes on Leadership Development News. Thank you for tuning in to tune up your performance. We'll see you. Till next time, take good care.